Ladies and gentlemen, can you believe it? It's already time for season 6 of Chewing the Gristle with yours truly, Greg Cox. So many delightful conversations to look forward to. We'll talk about music, yeah, sure. But you know what else we're going to talk about? Anything that comes to mind. So stay tuned. We got some good ones for you. Chewing the Gristle, season 6. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in for another installment of Chewing the Gristle with yours truly, Gregory Cockery. We've got the mighty Daniel Kimbro, a buddy of mine, a bass player extraordinaire. You've seen him with Jerry Douglas. He's on Clapton records. The guy gets all over the place, but he's also a very talented singer-songwriter in the Appalachian tradition. He corrected me. I used to say Appalachian, but it's Appalachian. Did you know that? Ladies and gentlemen, this week, Chewing the Gristle with Daniel Kimbro. Come on! Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for yet another season of Chewing the Gristle, and I'm honored and pleased to have our first guest of this season be the majestic Daniel Kimbro, musician extraordinaire, double bass thumping, angelic singing, cool songwriting, doggone it, and just a cool cat in general. You've seen him with Jerry Douglas. He's on everything from, you just name it. He's even on the latest Eric Clapton record. It's crazy.
Hey, it's crazy.
It's crazy. But here we are communicating via the inner Google. Daniel, how the heck are you?
I am fine. I have had only a couple of existential crises this morning. So for a Monday in the year of our Greg 2024, that's pretty good.
Yes, I like it.
Yeah, man. I'm just lamenting how much cooler your lighting and studio scene is in I guess your podcast isn't necessarily video-y, but I'm looking at it via the internet, as you said.
We like to tease people with having to use their imaginations during
I think that's for the best, considering.
I think so too. You know, they're spoiled. They get to see everything all the time, and for this podcast, they can only imagine what is transpiring.
100%.
Now, where are you this morning? Do you live in Knoxville proper, or are you?
I do. Yeah, I am in North Knoxville, Tennessee, in my house, which is just fine with me.
Yes.
Yeah. You and I spend a lot of time in hotels and in airplanes, and it's nice to have some time at home, buddy.
It is indeed. Now, are you home for the remainder of the year through the holidays?
More or less. I have a few Christmas gigs with an esteemed colleague, another Andy. You and I have some Andy friends in common, and
we do.
This guy is an incredible fiddler and mandoliner, and he's in the bluegrass scene. And his name is Andy Leftwich, and he plays with Ricky Skaggs and myriad other killers of the acoustic ilk. And so I am joining him for a few Christmas gigs with his bluegrass outfit, and that'll be really, really fun. And then I'm home until late December. It is December. I'm home until late January, pretty much. There's a few things here and there, but no touring per se until later in January.
It sounds like we have similar things to look forward to. The gig here and there until the end of January when the road beckons again.
Totally.
It happens. So you've been up to all kinds of activities this year, not to mention, or not the least of which is this new record of yours where you're singing, of course, your glorious, pristine voice. And very cool. Your turn of phrase is most delightful, my friend.
Oh, man. Well, that means you've listened to it, which humbles me to no end. Thanks,
I
Greg.
have indeed. I listened to it when I was in Europe, and then in preparation for our gathering here again, I also listened to it once again.
Thank you.
And I enjoyed it immensely, as well as the record you did with Martin Harley, which is
cool.
Has some nice stuff on it as well.
Thank you. Yeah, so Martin Harley is a slide guitar cat from England. He's actually Welsh, but he and another friend of ours, Sam Lewis, and myself have worked quite a lot together. And Martin and Sam have become dear friends of mine and have been really, really encouraging of my efforts away from the side person thing. I grew up in a family folk band, and so songwriting was always I don't know. We talked about it a lot on car rides or around meals and stuff like that. We were talking about folks like Bob Dylan and Townes Van Zandt and numerous other luminaries, Warren Zevon, Steve Earle, whomever.
Right.
And so there were all of that sort of what would now today be called Americana. And I always sort of had one foot in the Appalachian derived musics, and then one foot in the rock and roll or kind of other side of the family tree. It's all the same sort of blues derived stuff. I'm not telling you anything. And then going to music school, but I always had buddies who were really into progressive rock and stuff like that too. So I don't know, man. I don't think there's any rules. I don't try to stay in any lanes. I just try to do the thing that sounds fun and try to use that to pay the utility bill at the end of the month or the beginning or whenever the hell that day comes.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So the lyric matter on this latest record of yours,
Here it comes.
how much is autobiographical and how much is just observing from a rarefied vantage point?
Yeah, I would say mostly the latter, Greg. But to contextualize for the listener, a lot of murder ballads are happening here, and that is something very much within the Appalachian vernacular. Scotch-Irish music. We tend to apply happy melodies to very dire circumstances, and a lot of times those circumstances are telling of unrequited love.
Yeah.
And so I when I wrote the songs for this record, I was just in kind of this mode of honing in on those kinds of things, and there's some historical stuff in there too. The first track, which is called Loyston, Loyston, is a favorite of a lot of folks, which is really humbling, and it's on the new Jerry Douglas Band record as well. And that is a true story. It's about one of the inundated towns. We have the Tennessee Valley Authority lakes around here, around East Tennessee, and lakes all over the world. When we build dams, towns go underwater a lot of times, and so that's what that song is about. And then other ones are more or less just embellishments of my imagination.
Yes.
And the comment I get most when folks listen to it is like, "Wow, these are really cool songs. Are you okay?" Which I think films are written and poems are written and paintings are painted, and it's just a space that you're in at the time. I would take this opportunity to publicly say I harbor no one any ill will. It's just where I grew up and the kind of music that I grew up playing. So
yes.
Yeah.
Well, the second tune, Keep On Living, which is the one where you grabbed the title of the record from, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. Damn, you really listened to this. That's incredible. Thanks, Greg.
My pleasure. That one someone might think is a little autobiographical.
Yeah. So my mom and dad, their first concert, my mom and dad born in really rural places in East Tennessee, and their first concert was a Van Halen concert. They skipped church one night and drove up to Knoxville from points east and caught Van Halen, and their marriage lasted about as long as the first iteration of Van Halen did. So that's pretty cool. So that is a heavily embellished tale.
I got you.
Yeah, but that's the thing we get to do, isn't it? It's the same thing as when you're taking a solo. It's like you get to manipulate the plot however you want to. As long as you're intentional about it, it all counts. It's all valid. So I guess you could say. What is that disclaimer that you see in films all the time? The names of the the
Yeah.
characters have been changed to protect
The innocent,
identity.
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's kind of like that, but it's semi-autobiographical semi-biographical
Right.
from the vantage point of my folks. So yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know how many songwritery folks you really have on. I mean, I've listened to a lot of your Gristle casts, but I don't really know how many folks you have on that are songwritery. It's really cool of you to take such an interest in the subject matter, man.
Well, it fluctuates. I've always talked to people like my son is less inclined. Just because of his tastes and so on and so forth. Like when I talk to him about how I like Bob Dylan and so on and so forth.
You're talking about Dylan, your son, yeah?
Yeah, talking about Bob Dylan with my son Dylan.
That's cool.
and I always describe how when you have someone who has that connectivity with lyrical contact and the delivery, which I was experiencing when I was listening to your stuff. In the same way as like back in the day when I would listen to like the solo Bob Dylan, even with the band stuff, but and Johnny Cash, it's like I get the same thrill out of connecting with that intention and delivery as I do with a great improvisational thing on guitar or whatever the instrument might be. You're taken in, and that doesn't happen all the time because a lot of times, especially, this is just my personal take, but with Americana stuff, it kind of gets muddled a little bit where I'm not being taken with the lyrics in the same way and the music doesn't quite entrance me the same way. You know what I mean? It's kind of a weird thing for me personally. Yeah. But there is a thing where you get taken in and you have that experience. And yours definitely took me into that.
Oh man,
direction.
Thank you very much. That's high praise. Thank you. I agree 100%. When you're improvising, you're spontaneously composing, and that thing that I was saying about the plot. I was touring last year with an incredible songwriter and also an incredible instrumentalist. Her name is Sarah Jarosz. She's from Texas. And she was talking. I was saying after the gig, how after a gig you get back to the green room and everybody's on that adrenaline wave, but at the same time you're extolling all of the musical virtues of your bandmates while at the same time just shitting all over your own. and I was just like, oh my God, sorry about that chord. I played the complete wrong note in the 89th measure of the 14th song of the third whatever, and Sarah was saying, I said to her, God, that was a great solo on whatever the tune was, and she said, oh man, I wasn't sure, like I felt like I lost the plot, and I thought that was such a cool comment, and it's like, yeah, when you're really in it, when you're in this moment right here with a neck of an instrument in your hands, you're zoomed out in a way that allows you to marionette the strings, as it were, and
right.
and with intent, and that's the whole goal. And these are the kinds of things we talk about a lot of times with the campers at Andy Wood's guitar camp, where you and I met. Like, you can talk about different grips and different shapes and different scale chord relationships and all those kinds of things. But at the end of the day, you have to, that Charlie Parker thing, forget all that and just play. But ideally, lyrically, melodically, thematically, you have a larger Google Earth vantage point that you're really trying to maintain through the whole thing. And I try really hard when I'm writing, whether I'm writing prose kind of things for folks on my email list or whether I'm writing music, and that could be instrumental or lyrical. I'm trying to maintain that vantage point. And that's something that I definitely hear in your playing, when you're playing solos, when you're playing, your music is instrumental mostly, I assume, having heard the Cock Marshall Trio often. Like you, Toby, and Dylan, there is such a respect for whoever the person with the microphone, as it were, is at the moment. there's such a profound emphasis on building an arc, and I just see all of that stuff as plot lines and character arcs, man. And that's the lifetime goal is hopefully you set your look what I can do aside and you use what you can do as fodder for those character arcs as opposed to just a showcase of technique.
Exactly correct. So you grew up in a musical family.
Yes.
And you actually had, so that was the name of the band was Mountain Soul, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, man. My mom and dad, my dad was the real driver behind the ambitional, is ambitional a word? Behind the ambitional aspects of that group. In other words, he was running the website and booking the gigs and driving the Winnebago, as it were. and Mom and I and Dad too. I don't know. It was just always an opportunity to listen to music together, and then we would try to sing songs together and stuff. And I started out as a guitar player, and I just eventually realized that the cover band I was playing in as a middle school kid and as a high school kid, it was the bass playing was an opportunity to mitigate some of the skill gaps that I had on the 6-string neck. And so I grew up doing that. But I was also really an active band kid. I got into the school band in the 5th grade and was playing trombone, which was fortuitous because we shared the same sort of range for the most part as the electric bass. I taught myself where the E's were on the electric bass and then started teaching myself to read the bass clef. And then I saw the double bass professor from the University of Tennessee. They were doing an outreach program and they came to a local community center and I saw them play and I saw Rusty Holloway, who would become my eventual bass teacher, play the upright bass. And I thought, whoa, that's a whole nother paradigm. And then I witnessed Edgar Meyer play with a bow and sort of do very bluegrass fiddly kinds of things. And then that opened my mind to the classical realm because I think this happens with a lot of us where you check out someone's playing or maybe you're checking out the liner notes and then you want to know what else that cat played on. And then It turns out you're listening to a thing that you wouldn't have otherwise picked out of the CD bin. Maybe I'm dating myself here, but you wouldn't have chosen to maybe check that album out had that cat not been on that record. And it's a really great vehicle for discovery. Totally. So yeah, the musical family in the folk realm really ended up pushing me into really unique places. And I think that's one of the cool things about acoustic music is that it can lead you down some really interesting branches of different trees, that
absolutely.
you didn't, to abuse the wood analogy.
So then growing up in that musical family, it was not unusual, obviously, to think of that as a viable livelihood and something that you would go in, or was it kind of a little bit of both?
It was. It wasn't. My folks were just never, ever discouraging or like caution flag waving. It was never that. It was always like, yeah, okay, that's what you want to do? Cool. We'll try to figure out a way to buy the slightly nicer trombone. We'll try to find a better electric bass because this one has action inches high and Dad was really good. Like I remember one time in particular, we went to play a local radio station, which had a daily. It was a bluegrassy kind of folk, very small, low end of the radio dial in the 80s kind of radio station, in the 89.9 WDVX. And they were based in a camper in Clinton, Tennessee. And so you would go in and you would play local licks at 6 was the show. And we would play our songs, some of which were original and some were bluegrass and folk classics. And then if we were around Knoxville, a lot of times Dad would sort of parlay that into taking us somewhere. One time he took us straight from there to a concert down here at the world's excuse me, at the Chilhowie Park, where the state fair is always held in Knoxville, and it was Susan Tedeschi opening up for Buddy Guy, and then the main act was BB King, and I
Oh,
was
nice.
like, I remember having this moment then when I was like, this is cool. I just played a bluegrass gig in a camper, and I was in high school. I just played a bluegrass gig in a camper, and now I'm checking out this person who I didn't know at the time, and Susan, and then of course Buddy Guy, and of course BB King, and it was just wild. And then another concert, we were checking out Bela Fleck and Tony Rice after you know what I mean. And so my parents were. I give them a lot of credit for being really deliberate about exposing us to music, me and my two younger brothers, without saying this is good and this is bad, or this is valid and this is not hip enough. You know what I mean? Because they were just such listen-y folks. From mom was always blasting whatever Sting had just done, or old Police stuff, or she was just at hilariously loud volumes pumping classical music through the house. And then dad would come home and it would switch over to the Stanley Brothers or Flatt and Scruggs, or whatever. And so it was just that kind of thing. And they were professional and are professional musicians at different points of their lives, but for the most part, they had other means of income. I was kind of the next generation that tried to figure out how to actually make that thing be the whole thrust.
Yeah.
I'll let you know how it's going when I figure it out.
Yeah. Well, as far as the bluegrass thing is concerned, I've been always fascinated by this because when you grow up in that, at least exposed to that school of playing, there is a songbook. Am I right? There's a group of standards. What would you estimate? Sure. The quantity of these tunes, and what I mean? It's like what is the bluegrass songbook like in terms of learning curve and quantity of tunes, and what are the tunes that if someone wanted to, enter the realm of bluegrass, what would you suggest as like this? A quantity of standards to start off with.
Yeah, totally. I think it's very similar to when you start learning blues or jazz. We have these certain, I don't know, half dozen tunes that you're really expected. Like anybody can call them at any time and you would know them. The nice thing about, from a music, I guess you could say, from a composition or a theory point of view, is that bluegrass stuff is really approachable because it's pretty bluesy in the way that it's 1-4-5 chord kind of oriented, you know what I mean? And so a lot of that is because there's so much crossover between blues music and country music and bluegrass music, and those kind of interweave. But like I'm thinking, like if you took any of the Stanley Brothers lexicon catalog or Flatt and Scruggs, and like a Little Girl of Mine in Tennessee, or Salty Dog Blues, or Hot Corn, Cold Corn, or you start to know these songs, and there are so many instrumentals that are expected to be known. Like on the guitar side, Blackberry Blossom, and on the fiddle side, or Salt Creek in the guitar side, and then on the fiddle side, you'd be expected to know some sort of Orange Blossom Special, probably, or Billy in the Low Ground, or Red Haired Boy, and then Daybreak and Dixie on the banjo side, or Foggy Mountain Breakdown. Come on, or even the theme song from the Beverly Hillbillies. You know what I mean? Yeah. These are all things that are really, really pillar pieces in the bluegrass lexicon. So there are myriad resources online. It's not unlike jazz stuff. There are play-alongs all over YouTube. There are bluegrass playlists on whatever digital platform you choose to stream from. for which we will not be paid well. And
Right.
anyway, you can find these things, and there are far more qualified listers than I am. But it's very accessible, and it's a lovely primer for anyone who wants to try to get into music that is maybe more harmonically or melodically advanced. And I'm speaking of jazz here now, and it's just because when you get these, at a bluegrass jam, it's not uncommon for someone to maybe not know this particular version of this particular song, or maybe someone adds a chord change in that someone else doesn't. And so you hear numbers called a lot.
Right.
Go to the 4 there instead of the 6, or go to the 2 there instead of the 4, or go to the minor 2 instead of the 5, or it's a minor 2-5-1 in something like a David Grisman tune, or whatever. And so suddenly, because of an experiential learning situation where you're at a jam session and it's presented in a fun way, you're suddenly familiar with how maybe a little bit of a number system with music works.
Right.
And then next thing you know, you understand what a 2-5-1 is. And then someone's teaching you Take the A Train. And suddenly that's not all that different from another Flatt and Scruggs tune, or like you're doing a 6-2-5-1, which is Salty Dog Blues or Don't Let Your Deal Go Down from the Flatt and Scruggs catalog. And then suddenly you're thinking about, oh wait, what is a dominant 7th chord, and what is a minor 2 chord? And then next thing you know, you're playing the jazz music.
Jazz music.
Yeah. So anyway, I feel like it's a really great vehicle for understanding those kinds of things. And I think you can look at players like, Jerry Reed or Chet Atkins, or you had one of my favorite episodes of yours of the podcast is with Steve Warner. And these Tommy Emmanuel, my friend, these certified official guitarists. These cats are all heavily schooled, and maybe even primarily schooled in that kind of country roots music. And even Bill Monroe. I mean, Bill Monroe's mandolin licks are so Robert Johnson-y, it's not even funny, man.
Right.
Like, even Chuck Berry stuff. Like, you hear that in mandolin playing all the time. So
Sure.
I just feel like the bluegrass thing is such a great primer for so many different kinds of music, especially if you play an instrument that is in the rhythm section, like a rhythm guitar would be in bluegrass, or the bass would be. And I think there's probably no better example of that than like our mutual friend, how we met, Andy Wood. He's an incredible bluegrass mandolin player and acoustic guitar player. And that was really how he's from Western North Carolina. That's how that cat got introduced to music. And the melodic and harmonic concepts of that music are presented in such a casual way that it sort of demystifies and unscarifies music in a way that is really, really approachable. And I think that's a healthy thing for young brains. And so I just encourage anybody who wants to try to get a handle on melody against a chord sound to check out bluegrass music. Those fiddle tunes and those guitar tunes, and what does the melody sound like, and why do you play that chord with that melody note? And next thing you know, you're playing giant steps.
Yes. Well, speaking of kind of the transition to learning more sophisticated musical concepts and so on and so forth, I'm interested in, you did go to university, went to University of Tennessee, right?
I did. That's right.
And
great jazz school there.
So I was curious as to that transition, because it might be interesting for folk to kind of get their mind around someone who is already from a family background, already kind of doing music as a living.
Yeah.
And I'm sure most of the people that you went to school with were not from that
That's true.
rarefied vantage point. I've used that twice now in our conversation. So I'm interested as how you got your mind around that, in terms of saying, okay, well, I want to learn a little bit more about what's going on here, because what was your goal at that point? Because you were already kind of doing what most of those people, let's be honest, that are going to music school will never end up doing. A lot of them, right? Because that's just the way the business works.
That's a good point. I haven't really ever thought of it that way, Greg.
So, how was that transition, and what were your goals going to that school? What did you want to get out of it?
I think much in the same way we were talking about how a name on a liner note can lead you down a new rabbit hole. It was the same way for me with music school, in that when I saw Rusty Holloway playing the upright bass at the age that I was, which was maybe like a junior in high school, that instrument seemed so unwieldy and weird and unapproachable from like I'd played guitar before, and it's like, okay, well, the electric bass neck makes sense, but this vertically oriented fretless bass neck that is, feet long in scale seems so weird. And we got one and started messing around on it, and it was like, okay, it kind of makes sense, but this hurts. and like, how do you play this thing consistently in tune once you start venturing up the neck? So really learning to play the double bass, I had never really seen it happen before, apart from in some videos and seeing, the cat on the Lawrence Welk show or whatever on PBS playing one. So that was the vehicle to go to music school, because I knew that teacher, and I knew that I was supposed to go to college and get the hell out of Morristown, Tennessee somehow. So it was just that simple. It didn't ever occur to me that there were already music schools that were teaching roots music and bluegrass, and there were fiddle camps and guitar camps and mandolin camps and even bass camps. I didn't know that those things existed. And so it was just like, this is my way to immerse myself in this and figure out how this unwieldy instrument can be better. And if I'm going to make a living as a bass player, surely I'm going to have to be able to do more than one thing pretty well. And so when I started studying with Rusty, he was really adamant about that. He's like, you're going to double major in, the symphonic musics and in the jazz stuff, and you're going to work on the electric bass as though it were the double bass as far as a pedagogical technical approach. And you're going to apply the grid electric bass system to the upright bass. And so it was just, honestly, the whole impetus behind music school was to really get my head around the things I didn't understand intrinsically about how the double bass worked and about how jazz worked, and how, you get to a point in bluegrass music or in folk music where a minor 2 to a dominant 5 to a 1 chord makes sense. But but there's something spicy in that 1 chord. It's like, oh, it's a major 7. Oh, it's a major 7 there's a sharp 11 in there too. You're getting a nice Lydian sound in there, man. Right. Whoa, and then you start getting some altered sounds, and it's like, oh my gosh, that we're speaking a whole new accent of the same old language here. And anyway, so it became a vehicle to incur ass loads of financial debt while learning a lot. It's just an opportunity to for me. I didn't do college in the traditional sense. It took me forever to graduate because I took no core classes. I just took so many music hours.
I get that.
I just immersed myself. I played in every ensemble that I could. So that I would not have to practice by myself as often as I should have done. But anyway, maybe that's a long-winded, convoluted answer to the question, but it's the same thing as the liner notes, Greg. Like, okay, if I'm going to do this bass thing, I'm going all the way in. As far as I know how to go in my current circumstances here in East Tennessee, I'm going to Knoxville and I'm studying the bass. And that's why,
Right.
Yeah.
And so you did get a degree.
I did. That right before I finished school, they stopped awarding 2 degrees for the amount of hours in the different courses that I took. So I'm a little bitter about that still these many years on. But yeah, I have a degree in strings music with an emphasis in studio music and jazz.
Oh, nice.
Yes. Yeah, which is, I can tell you exactly how much it's worth, actually, but I'm not going to.
Yes. Well, luckily
Yeah,
I went to college in a time where it was pretty doggone cheap, which is good.
Cool. That's cool.
But yeah,
That's great, Greg.
times have changed a little bit, but hey, what are you going to do?
Yeah, but I mean, as you say, there are so many more ways. Experiential learning is you can't put a financial value on that. You know,
Right.
getting out, being in the circumstance, going to a jam session, going on the road, and you know, playing the same licks over and over, listening to the same albums over and over until you can't stand it anymore, and it just becomes a part of your musical DNA. Those are crucial things to do, and that's what you did. That's what I continue to try to do. This is the way, as the Mandalorian might say.
We interrupt this regularly scheduled gristle-infested conversation to give a special shout-out to our friends at Fishman Transducers, makers of the Greg Koch signature Fluence Gristle Tone pickup set. Can you dig that? And our friends at Wildwood Guitars of Louisville, Colorado, bringing the heat in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains. Now, let me ask you this. You're living in the mighty Knoxville. Have you, of course, that's pretty doggone close to Nashville. So I don't,
Yeah.
and through your experiences with who you've all played with, there's probably not the necessity to relocate to more of a quote unquote music town. But
Yeah.
would you agree with that?
To an extent, I agree with that. There's definitely some FOMO sometimes that comes up and rears its ugly head in my subconscious. But the world is smaller than it used to be in terms of travel logistics and in terms of recording technology. I mean, for example, we're doing this, of course, over the internet, as you said, doing this interview. But Nashville is, depending upon what part of town, between 2.5 hours and 3 hours away for me. And I gain an hour across the time zones. And so it just has become this work commute. I consider myself based out of Nashville, and I live in Knoxville. That's how often I'm there, 2 or 3 times a month, usually. I'll go over again next week for a quick recording session with some killers. It's funny. I used to be really in my head about not having tried Nashville, but it turned out that our family life started earlier than we intended it to. My wife is an educator. She is a school teacher of 20 some years here in Knoxville. She teaches band. Actually, she teaches beginning band.
Oh, no kidding! Bless her.
Yeah. She's incredible. She's an incredible educator, and she does lots of clinics where she's hired to go to different places, different cities, and educate kids who have auditioned for maybe like an honor band or something like that. And so she had a good thing going, and then we had our daughter, and then we had our son, and it was just like, you know what? Knoxville is a more effective place to live for our family lifestyle. And so we're going to do it here. And people give me credit for figuring out how to make it work, which is really, really sweet. But I honestly just feel like I just said yes to as many things as possible.
Yes. I've said those words myself.
Yeah. And so I live here. I do quite a few remote recording sessions here at my house on electric bass or on upright bass, especially double bass, doghouse, bull fiddle. And then, I get on airplanes and tour buses in Nashville, and that's the way it is.
And away you go.
And away I go.
Let's talk about the balance between obviously playing with Jerry Douglas. It's an awesome thing. I mean, it is musically outstanding. You know, he's obviously got legendary status and so on and so forth. But now you find yourself doing this more original material.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, do you always foresee the necessity of being the sideman, or are you at some point going, you know what, I'm going to do my own thing, and no matter what that takes? I'm interested if that's entered your thought processes.
Yeah, I don't think I consider those things proprietary. I don't sort them into those two piles. I just see it all as feeding the music portfolio.
Sure.
I think a music career in 2020, whatever, must be a diverse one where you say yes to as many things as you can until it becomes time to say no to the correct things. And
Right.
and that saying of no is informed by things like, of course, logistics. I am booked, I am not booked, but it's also by mental health, and by which I mean not just exhaustion or mitigation thereof, but am I into this, and does it suit me creatively, and does it allow me to put my best feet forward as an accompanist or as a performer in a more featured context. And so ideally for me, let's be real. The bottom line is, how much does it pay, and can I afford not to do it? Or
Right. Oh,
you know, but there
absolutely.
are things that we do that pay absolute nothing, and we go do them, or maybe they pay but they wash out after you factor in the cost of the travel or whatever. That, you know, so many of us, we work and work and work to get to the point to where we get to do the gigs that we really want to do, and most of the time we don't make any money on those particular gigs, but we go do them because of the people that we want to play with. And that happens to me a lot in Nashville. You go do a bar gig in Nashville because I can't wait to play with Jordan Pearlson, or with Matt Alger, or with my friend Sam Lewis, or whatever.
Mhm.
And those are really, really fun to do, and they feed you creatively. And then you try to balance that against, yeah, well, God, okay, a 3-week tour, here we go. I don't feel like being gone for 3 weeks and losing that much sleep between time zones, but it's going to be really, really cool to be on stage every night with Jerry Douglas and Tommy Emmanuel. So let's
Sure.
go. You know what I mean? And so I guess the answer to your question is I try at this point in my life to really find, does that boost me creatively, and is it worth my time financially? And if as many of my yes boxes are checked as possible, if I can check those boxes, then I can go do it. And that's about it. I think that right now I do feel more motivated to put my own songwritery thing out there. And that's due in no small part to a lot of the affirmations that I've received from some heroes and peers like Jerry and Tommy. Jerry Douglas and I, there's the Jerry Douglas Band, which is 4 of us, myself and the incredible Mike Seal on electric guitar, and the incredible Christian Settlemeyer on the violin. And we go do our thing, but sometimes that's not as logistically possible. And so Jerry and Tommy are under the same music management umbrella.
Got it.
And so there was this idea, hey, what if Jerry opens with his thing for Tommy Emmanuel and then plays with Tommy, but how can we make that? They've done that before. How can we up the ante of that tour? And it was like, hey, Daniel, would you consider doing this? And the answer was yes. And Jerry was like, hey, I've heard some of your songs. Why don't we do some of them on that tour? You
Nice.
know, and so that was an opportunity to push aside the fear guy and say, you know what? Hell yeah, let's go try a couple of these songs in front of these folks and see what happens. And people loved it. And Jerry was like, these are good songs, man. And he's produced enough songwriters to where I can take his word for it. And
Sure.
I can tell the imposter syndrome guy to shut up for a minute and listen to the guy who's won 16 Grammy Awards.
Right.
And sometimes it takes, not that this isn't meant to sound kind of like braggadocious and name droppy, but it takes that to get above yourself sometimes and get that Google Earth view of your own
Oh, yeah,
creative
totally.
thing. You know what I mean? And so it's like, you know, when someone like Greg Koch or Andy Timmons comes up to you when you've just sung some bluegrass songs at a little music camp, and they say, dude, this is good, you should do this more often. It's a nice thing to hear. And so I guess the long ass winded answer to your question is I try to balance all of it. If there's enough accompanist opportunity, that gives me an opportunity to see someone like Sarah Jarosz work a room and compose a set list. And how does that work?
Right.
How do I address the audience and keep them engaged? And then how do I get to see an instrumental person like Tommy Emmanuel build his set and interface with an audience, and what is that experience like versus what it's like when I am listening to one of his recorded pieces,
Right.
and it's like, oh, he did this differently live, and I bet I know why. It lands differently in front of people than it does in front of just a microphone in a sterile studio.
Exactly.
And then I guess all the decisions inform all the decisions is the answer, and so I don't try to exclude any musical experience, and maybe that sounds woo, but I really don't. It's like I want to be the music director at Andy Wood's guitar camp and try to play Tom Quayle fusion, and then I want to walk down the hill and sing Rocky Top, or whatever, and then I want to go sing my murder ballads, and I don't know, if I don't focus on any one of those things too much, maybe that's not ideal. Maybe I would be more of a specialist and I could be a little more virtuosic, but I like to wear this jack of all trades hat, and I'm certainly a master of none of them, but the learning experience at each of these junctures is just too rich, to deprive myself of.
I can dig it all.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the bluegrass vocal thing. Has always been fascinating to me because there's just there's a purity of voice and the pitch.
Totally.
There's never like swooping up to the pitch. It's just there, and I'm just wondering,
man,
how does that happen?
Well, if you find out, if you'd let me know, I would really appreciate it, because that is something that I struggle with. I keep thinking, like, one of these days I'm going to get out from behind my own shadow and take some vocal lessons from someone who is really good at it. Like, it is that thing. I think it's, if I put my ethnomusicological hat on and I think about how mountain singing works here in the Smoky Mountains, for example, or how field hollers work, or even the Gaelic and Gaelic traditions in Scotland and Ireland. It's just the way. And a lot of times, and I could be totally off base here, no pun intended, but I think a lot of these songs or the styles of these songs, the style of singing, occurred in historical places where they were accompanying tasks. And so it wasn't a performative thing as much as it was a recitation. And whenever you recite something, you do so in a plainer speech until you start to take ownership of those words, and then you begin to embellish it. And when you're reading a poem that you really care about or that really speaks to you, you start to incorporate what can only be defined as musical elements. There are pitch rises and falls. There are dynamics. There are softer. There are louder. There are different ways that you emote within the context of a recitation. And I think that is probably why Appalachian musics are so honest in their delivery. And I try to do that. There are people who do it with so much more nuance and skill than I do. But what I do try to bring to it is as honest a vocal sound and intent as I possibly can.
Yeah.
And you're right. There's just not a lot of melisma, little turny embellishments, but when they are, they're very, very clean, clear, and deliberate. There aren't a lot of scoops unless there are scoops. It's just a very intentional way of being unintentional almost. It's really hard to qualify the sound of Appalachian singing. And
well, it's interesting. I think you're getting at that effortlessness of,
yes.
And that was one of the things for me. It's like thinking about when I would listen to, when I was a youngin', I was exposed to, once I got to college, Jimmy Bryant and
oh God, yeah,
and Joe Maphis,
yes,
and just that alternate picking,
totally,
and they were just clean as a whistle,
yeah,
and it wasn't until. And I was like, how could because every time I did, I would tense up. When I was doing my blues playing or whatnot, everything was loosey-goosey, body language, everything loose, totally. No problem. And then as soon as I was going to do this other stuff that was not necessarily my original wheelhouse, I would tense up, and there would be this, tensing up both left and right handed. It wasn't until I saw those guys on YouTube, of all things, when you could actually look these guys up and see what, and they're playing some old black and white television program. And the look, the body language couldn't have been more laid back. And there was no tenseness.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing as you're talking about because of this recitation aspect of some of those. There's just an effortlessness because it's just like, oh, this is what I'm doing now. This is what I've always done.
Yeah.
And not to say that there wasn't practice to get to that point, but I think it never came from a position of overthinking it, maybe. Yeah. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. And I think that's one of the great failings of musical academia. When you codify, and this is not meant to throw anyone under any bus, but you have the ABCs of jazz method. You have a David Baker, Jamie Aebersold, and the late great Knoxvillian Jerry Coker. These sort of really structured ways of codifying what is primarily an improvised music are very, very useful to teach it, but they're not necessarily useful to install it in an innate way. And it becomes really, really difficult. This is the struggle that all of us music educators eventually encounter. It becomes really, really difficult to encourage that looseness and encourage that playfulness and relaxation. And so when it is presented to you at such a young age, and all of the great grassers that I know, all of them encountered the style of singing, the style of playing at such an early age. And I'm not saying that there's no hope for those of us who try to mutate ourselves later on in life. I still do that with the clawhammer banjo. And Jesus, Greg, if you could hear how terrible I am at playing Away in a Manger on the piano. I mean, literally, the book is right there behind my basses over there. I'm serious. It's 1, 3, 5, left hand, first position in C. Away in a manger. Seriously, I'm so bad at piano, and it breaks my heart. It's like, why didn't I do this when I was a kid? But anyway, if it was one of the things that I hope we figure out one day as a species is how to install the freedom while we install the rules.
Right.
And I don't know the answer to it, man. But I don't know. I think it's the same. I think when we study other kinds of music that are non-Western, I think that really helps too. I mean, God, listen to Derek Trucks play. And your, like, dude, your microtonal bends that you use if you're using a tremolo bar or if you're using your fingers to manipulate string bends in such specific ways, there is you eventually get to a freedom when you get so specific, I think, and I don't know how to do it yet, and I'll let you know if I figure it out, but I know what you're saying. I have no idea. I have no idea what I just said. That was such a terrible answer.
No, that was good. That's good.
Honest.
But this whole idea of, of effort, and it's really a hard thing to convey to people because, you say, well, just take it easy and not try so hard. But in order to get to that point, you've tried unbelievably hard.
Totally, man. I know, right? Yeah. Yeah, it is like that. I think it's really important to have other vocations outside of music, because I think sometimes those can give you permission to be a little more playful with music and try hard in new ways. For me, that's like fly fishing. Like more effort with a fly fishing cast or more effort with a golf swing in no way results in a better thing. It does not produce a better result. Right. Because what you do is you start to introduce some sort of herky-jerky thing that interrupts the whole transfer of energy, either to a ball or to a fly line. And I haven't figured out the right combinations of words that would describe that in a musical way, but I think the same principles are there. It's probably all been written by George Lucas somewhere. in you know in Frank Oz's Yoda voice.
Right.
But like it is that there is no try kind of thing, and there is a thing that happens. Like if you, I'm sure many listeners have done the same thing that I have done and gone down like Troy Grady YouTube plunges, you know, and watched, you know, like picking techniques. And I've watched the Eric Johnson video like 90 times, and I love it so much. And it's mostly just because I love the alchemy of, whoa, these are really simple 5 and 6 note pentatonic patterns. But God, when you play them at speed live in concert, the alchemy of that, it sounds like such a thing. It's so much richer than it is whenever it's stripped down and into its constituent parts. The sound is, it's like eating a great piece of sourdough bread. You know the ingredients and you know the process, but God, you still have these explosions in your mind from your taste buds. And so there's something about when you distill emotion down to its purest iteration, you can find freedom in there eventually. And I guess repetition factors into that somehow. But I surely the fastest way to get it is to watch a master of it as often as possible. That's the best thing I can recommend to when you're finding to when you're seeking that kind of fluidity.
Yes.
I don't think there are very many better examples of it, especially in an improvisational context, than the person sitting opposite me on this Zoom transmission. I mean it. Like, I love at the Woodshed when we do our artist concert. I always like it when you and Toby and Dylan go first because it gets me so fired up. And I watched you guys and I watched the abandon with which you perform, and it makes me so much less scared about messing up one of Mark Lettieri's grooves. Or so much less scared about singing something or forgetting the third B section, which is totally different from the other two in one of Andy Wood's tunes.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you get out of the way of the result and you get into the process. And that is the only way to be free, is to be a process-oriented person. I think you focus on the process and then the result takes care of itself. It's the same thing I tell students. It's the same thing I tell my teenage kids. You know, I'm teaching my kid to mow the yard. It's like, don't worry about what it looks like at the end of it. Just keep the wheels in line with the line that you made the last time.
Right,
and it becomes a meditative thing. You know what I mean? Anyway, yeah. My opinions only, folks. My opinions only. Don't tell Jeff Berlin.
They're majestic opinions. Well, yeah, I hope we get to do some playing again this year. I was in Europe this year at the
right
when you guys did the camp. So we'll see what happens this year. I don't know. My schedule with the ensemble has been a little crazy, but it's been a blast. I mean, it's, you know, the reason why I asked earlier, of course, you're a younger fellow than I am, and my kids are older. And once your kids get old enough where they're kind of out and about and doing their own thing, then you get a little bit more wiggle room to go, well, maybe I just want to do my own thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
And so as a result, it's like I'm realizing so many things of being on the road, doing my own thing, and that you just don't know unless you've really immersed it. And I don't regret any of the things I did to get to this point because I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing now.
Exactly. Regret is a useless emotion.
Exactly. And I'm grateful for all those opportunities, but good God, it's fun just going out and playing your own thing. You know, it's
totally.
It's you know, so we're having fun.
Yeah, having said all that bullshit I did about it, you know, I try to keep it balanced, man, and I like to.
Oh no, I get it. Believe me, I know exactly.
It's like honestly, what I want to do is I just want to go sing my own songs in places where the fly fishing is incredible. So if anybody figures out a touring system where I just get to go to like Montana and Wyoming all the time during the summer, hit me up.
And you never know. You may indeed manifest it. My goodness.
I'm trying. We should actually properly talk just for a second, if you don't mind, Greg.
No, go right ahead.
You and I did meet at Andy Wood's Woodshed Guitar Camp. And
that's
so
correct.
Andy Wood has been a friend of mine. He lives here in Knoxville. He's another Bluegrass kid. We're 40-year-old Bluegrass kids now. And but Andy has a guitar camp that happens yearly in Crossville, Tennessee. Excuse me. And I am now the music director for that. I stepped into Adam Nitty's incredible shoes because he couldn't do the second year of the camp, and I succeeded him in the bass playing position. And that camp is still very young, and we're figuring out lots of different ways to improve it each year. And you have been a featured clinician there every year except for maybe the last one. And we have folks like the regular clinicians include, of course, Andy and yourself, and Andy Timmons and Mark Letary, and
Brent Mason.
Brent Mason is there every year, and we've had Tom Quayle a couple of times, and Ben Eller, who a lot of folks will know from his incredible YouTube channel.
Right.
And
I need to get Ben on this program as well.
Yeah, Ben. Talk about a great music educator. Ben is really great at codifying principles,
right,
without rigidity, without installing rigidity at the same time. You know what I mean? And then like we've had featured folks like Joe Bonamassa and Robin Ford and Eric Johnson. And then we just had Steve Morse this last year. And the setting is incredible. It's beside this pastoral lake that I fish in the mornings, and then we go teach and rehearse in the afternoons. And it is not a guitar camp, Greg. It's a music camp. And that's one thing Steve Morse said. He said, I've never been to a place where cats were just like talking about how to make the song better as opposed to how to make the shred better.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I love that. And we all sit and we eat dinner together with the campers, and it's just a really approachable, cool thing. So if you're interested in that, just Google the Woodshed Guitar Experience.
Correct.
And we're really like we have conversations after that camp every year. I just had one with Randy, one of the primary financial movers and shakers with that camp, and he's like, well, what from your vantage point, Daniel, what do we need to do differently next year? And I love that. That's such a lovely approach. Again, a process-based approach to putting on a really unique thing. And so I know there's a lot of guitar players hanging out.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Listening. So please check out the Woodshed. It's really, really cool. And
it's good times. And the food's good too, which is important.
The food's good. It is. And it's cool.
Yeah, and I think that one thing especially great, in addition to all the things you just mentioned, is the fact that in some of these other camps, there is really kind of a us and them mentality with the clinician / artist versus the peeps. And I mean, there's always some good interaction at all the camps, but this camp in particular, you're just hanging out with people all the time, which is great.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I mean, boundaries are good, right? You need to have time to compose yourself maybe before or after a performance, or you need to have time when you can just let your hair down and scream at somebody about how frustrated you are about the way you just played Tom Quayle's song. And maybe you don't want the person who just paid a significant amount of money to be there. You don't want them to hear that because you don't want them to feel like their experience has not been a pristine one. But at the same time, like you just said, the accessibility for the folks that are there to learn, and I always learn just ass loads every time I'm there, you know, in watching my peers work, and in watching the folks who attend the camp as campers, it's watching their own explosions go off, own eureka moments. It's rewarding for everybody there, you know, and it's a good thing.
It is a good thing. And there's a Buc-ee's right at the off-ramp at Crossville. You can get some delicious cuisines.
Speaking of Martin Harley, can you imagine he came over for a U.S. tour and I took him to a Buc-ee's? Can you imagine a person from the U.K. experiencing pulling into a Buc-ee's the first time?
We took Tom Quayle. When Tom Quayle first arrived, the first year he came in, we had just introduced ourselves. We didn't really, and me and Dylan and Toby took him in the Gristle Missile, and we're like, we're taking you someplace. And he was astounded. Now every time I go to one, I always snap a little picture and send it to him.
Yeah, he almost tuned his guitar in fourths.
I like to say it's all that's great and horrible about America in one fell swoop.
Dude, that is so accurate. There is not a single thing in Buc-ee's that doesn't have sugar in it. The lettuce has sugar in it. I'm pretty sure.
Exactly.
It's incredible.
Exactly,
yeah, man.
Correct.
I wanted to send a hello along from Roscoe Beck. He was in town and with Eric Johnson a few months ago. We had dinner. Like Eric was like, no, you got to meet Roscoe. He's a major hero of mine, Greg.
Oh, yeah, Roscoe's my boy.
I mean, yep. I know you guys are close, and Roscoe is one of the kindest people I've ever encountered. And he was immediately like, come here. And he got me like doors were open. They were going to start in like 45 minutes. And he's like on stage, he turns his rig on. He's like, play this, check this out. Because I'm going to play a Roscoe Beck bass, the original Fender version of it, right. That I used to lust after in the Fender catalog by the lamp light when I was in high school. And he was just so kind and sweet. And we send text messages back and forth. The same with Eric. And anyway, it's been so great to get to know more of the folks in the community, that folks like you and Timmons and Andy Wood, you guys really, really like fan the flames of collaborative music exchange. And I think that's really, really cool. So awesome. Thanks for me. You didn't know that I was, but I was dropping your name real hard. And that's how come I got to have dinner with Roscoe Beck. One of the reasons anyway. So I appreciate it.
Well, I'm glad that turned out. Yeah, he's a gentleman and a scholar. And
oh my God. Incredible.
As are you, my good man. It was an absolute pleasure getting to talk with you today.
Likewise, I'm honored.
Everything that you do, and it's always fun hanging out with you. And I hope we get to do that again in person and do some music again in the not too distant future.
I'm so flattered to be among the mighty Gristlers. Yes, gristling through the grave. Whistle. I'm trying to find whistle analogies.
I like it. I like them all.
Yeah.
All right, my friend. Thanks so much. You have a good Christmas is coming up. You have a great holiday season, and let the good times roll. And hopefully I will see you in the not too distant future here in 2025.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate you, man. Hi to Dylan. Hi to Toby.
Likewise, my friend. Take it easy. Have a good one.
All right. See ya.
Bye-bye. Well, thanks for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Chewing the Gristle. We certainly do appreciate you stopping by. Make sure you tell your friends all about us. I think they might enjoy themselves. So thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.